Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Gamecock Nation, what is up? Game week rolling on. South Carolina, North Carolina set for Saturday evening, 7:44 kickoff. Did you know that, Chris? 7:44 official.
Yeah, man, I got it. I'm
kickoff
in.
Time. You're in it. You're in on the secret. Not 7:30 anymore, but still, I know y'all are probably a little bit. You want to have one more drink at your tailgate. A little slow getting into the game. Tell everybody at 7:30. That'll give you a 14-minute buffer to actually make it to your seat. As of right now, official game notes, 7:45 kickoff for Gamecocks and North Carolina. We are pumped for that. We're also pumped about our buddy Clint Hammond, clint.hammond.com. He is with Movement Mortgage, 803-771-6933. Clint texted me out of the blue yesterday, Chris. He said he is scared to death because he is so confident in a Gamecock win that that alone has him nervous. It's a cycle. Basically,
Man.
He got so confident that he scared himself to death.
I absolutely love it. Clint is fired up. My man was fired up at the Gamecock Central kickoff party. I'm sure his excitement he practically ran in, Wes, to the party. And I could tell he's fired up about some Gamecock football. I don't need to buy a house right now, but if I did, I would be probably more excited about just getting Clint's Gamecock football takes than I would on buying the house. Like, we'd spend like 10 minutes on the house and 45 minutes on football, probably.
That would be on brand, but
Yeah.
Best mortgage guy in the business. Give him a shout or just go check out clint.hammond.com. We're halfway through game week. Before y'all know it, you will be watching the Gamecocks kick it off against North Carolina. And Chris, coordinator speaking today, we wondered, and it did end up including Pete Limbo, South Carolina special teams coordinator, of course, Dow Loggins, offensive coordinator, and of course, Clayton White, defensive coordinator as well. We've got a lot to get to in this show, including might be joined by our buddy Chris Pascal, working on making sure we've got that set up. I was a little bit late hopping on, but Chris, let's start with the coordinators. And you got to always start offense. Dow Loggins, I thought pretty measured today. Like, there wasn't a whole lot new. He was pretty measured about what he had to say. But still, maybe a little interesting note here or there. I've noticed that Loggins will give you a lot, I think you used the word philosophically. He'll give you a lot in terms of approach, in terms of mechanics of how they do things. Like, oh, this is what we did to prepare for this. This is what we did in the NFL when you could talk to the quarterback directly into their ear through their helmet earpiece right up until 15 seconds before the snap and or for the end of the play clock. So he'll give you a lot on that. Now, you want to get into the X's and O's. You want him to tell you who's going to be the starting left tackle. That's when he's really not going to give you a whole lot at all on that.
No, absolutely. I've always been interested in his press conferences because of getting into some of those philosophical weeds, Wes. And, the things that stood out to me today were not surprising in any form or fashion with what Loggins said. But I think they were all things that fans wanted to hear. Right now, hearing it in a press conference is one thing. It is ultimately going to come down, and this is actually one of the things I wanted to hit on that Loggins said, points, right? Like, talking about when it comes to evaluating a statistic to gauge your progress on offense, what does that look like? What does Loggins look at? He said points, right? And so ultimately, that's what fans are going to look at. When he walks in to his weekly press conference after the North Carolina game to kind of dissect what happened, look forward to the Furman game. At the end of the day, Wes, if they score a bunch of points against North Carolina and win, he could be the most boring person in the world, and it would be fine. He could be the most engaging person in the world, and if the team isn't producing, people are going to kind of go to that, right? They're going to go to the points. So I thought that was something that fans nonetheless probably wanted to hear. Another one, Wes, you and I were wondering about this earlier today. Would the team respond from the Tuesday practice yesterday that was pretty crummy? Shane Beamer stopping himself from using a worse word. I think what did he say? Crappy.
It was crap.
It was crap. And it seems it's crap. If it seems like based on what Loggins thought, they responded today, which is not a big surprise, right? I think you kind of expected that. And so they came and responded today. And the last thing, Wes, before I turn it back over to you to kind of drive this bus, he was asked what makes him optimistic about Saturday. And I was interested in this answer, not, hey, we got a great team. I'm confident in my abilities. He said those things in the past, right? But he mentioned number 7, Spencer Rattler, and that being a primary reason for what makes him confident. And we've talked about this a lot in the offseason, man. There are a lot of factors that are going to go into this offense, but number 7 has the ability to do some special things for you. And the staff seems to feel like he's had a big offseason and is ready to take that next step. Spencer seems to be playing with confidence. The staff seems to be very confident in him as well.
Yeah, I mean, in football, if you got a quarterback, you got a chance. I think South Carolina feels like they got their guy. They have a quarterback, and now they're just ready to – I mean, I don't know about you, man. I kind of got the feeling those guys today, except for Pete Limbo, who just kind of – he's always going to give you some detail and some color and all these different things. I kind of got the feeling Loggins and Clayton White are just at the point of like, let's go play some ball. Like let's line this thing up. Let's go see. There were even a couple of occasions, or I guess one occasion in particular, I should say. I think it was when he was asked about the running game, and Loggins basically said to an extent, like, yes, we are confident in our guys. We like what they have done, but we do still have questions that need to be answered on the offensive line. And he made a comment at a later point about, hey, we like our talent. Like, we like our guys, but we're ready to go see how they match up with other people. And we can get so caught up in our bubble, whether you're media or fans or whoever, you follow every last little detail of your team, and you forget this is a game of matchups. And you can be made to look really good by beating up on bad teams. You can look really bad if you get beat up by a really good team. And so ultimately, you're not playing in a vacuum. I think they do feel good about the progress of their guys to an extent. Are there still questions even internally? Yes. They feel good, but I think he made a comment about, hey, at Arkansas, we didn't really know what to expect. I think he even said he didn't think they were going to be too good in a couple of areas, and they ended up being pretty good.
Yeah.
So that caught my attention.
Didn't he say he thought they were going to stink?
I didn't want to misquote him, but I think that's what he said.
I think that's what he said. And, and you look, Loggins only spent a year there, but, based on – I know Arkansas didn't have the season they thought, but their ability to run the football was typically not among their problems with Rocket Sanders, former high school wideout, and then, of course, having KJ Jefferson. So, yeah, look, you to some extent, Wes, to go off what you said, when you're playing freshmen, right, we know there's a lot of freshmen that are going to factor into this football team based on what Shane Beamer said, and that can be concerning at times, right? Even if they're very talented, they are still first-year guys, and none of them, absolutely none of them, have taken a snap in a college football game. So that's always a concern, right? Kind of like a kicker, right? If you got a kicker, super talented, but he's never gone out there and kicked a 45-yard field goal in a pressure situation in a pressure-packed stadium, you don't know what you're going to get. And look, I think it's a great point about the bubble too. Like, we look at it and say, okay, South Carolina's linebackers have improved a good bit. That's what we think. Do we know that? I don't think we can know that. I think we can say they're going to be better than last season. that's probably a little bit more less subjective, maybe a little bit more objective. You can look at measurables. You can look at, production metrics from last off season to this off season, and you can make that determination. But when you get into kind of how much better can they be, that's when it becomes more difficult, right? Because you're going to play other teams that have really, really good football players. A lot of those other teams are going to improve from one year to another individually and collectively. So that's kind of, I think, the beauty of college football, but it's also why week one is so intriguing. If you have an opponent that's not, an FCS opponent or not, a big step down in competition, there's so much intrigue around it because you just don't know what you're going to get. And there's so much intrigue around this team, Wes, I think, especially offensively, because of the new offense. And, what is it going to look like structurally, and how big of a leap has Spencer made? What does DeCarrion look like at running back? There are just so many of those questions, to answer, to say nothing even of the offensive line, which you mentioned earlier.
I think Loggins does a really good job of giving fans some perspective when you really listen to him talk. And he kind of does take you into his seat a little bit as far as what his role is as offensive coordinator. I thought that was great perspective. You may hear, oh man, Carolina had a crappy practice on Tuesday. It's game week. How can there be no sense of urgency? What's going on? What does this mean for Saturday? We talked about this earlier on the radio. I don't think it meant really a whole lot at all, but the perspective there, which Loggins brought, it was almost like he kind of expected there to be a lull that day, because he said, look, they had 4 days off. They really got to reset this weekend. So you can hear, oh man, they had a terrible practice, and you can panic, or you can be like, well, okay, 4 days off. You're trying to like get back into the groove. It's a perfect opportunity for Beamer to grab his team's attention and be like, guys, what are we doing? This is not good enough. While at the same time, I don't think it's a time for panic whatsoever. And just that perspective of, hey, this could be a reason for that, I thought was very, very interesting. I thought it was also, I love, Chris, I love, like, in a nerdy way, I love hearing the thoughts on play calling, not the stuff we talk about where it's like successful play call, good, play didn't work, bad play call, this guy sucks. But
Right.
the actual process, how do you go into a game? How do you script your first 10, 15 plays? Getting into the details of, okay, if I put this formation out there, if I have 3 guys to the boundary, what is the tendency to how Gene Chizik likes to play that defensively? And I can watch 15 years of film of Gene Chizik and be like, okay, 70% of the time he likes this against this look. But then I'm in Charlotte and it's 8:05 p.m. Well, Chizik has gone to something completely different against this look. So all week long, we've said, all right, we're going to try to get them in trips. They're going to respond by doing this, and then we're going to call this play because our percentages of it being successful are going to be up versus just, oh, we're running a random play, right? Well, now, as Loggins said, halftime is too late. Halftime is too late to make an adjustment. So we'll get into this on Friday, game within the game adjustments, and how all sides are going to be dealing with some unknowns. But I thought that was a fascinating look into the mind of a coordinator as they are going into really any game, but especially a week one. You have an idea. This is what they like to do. This is what, and then you throw in down and distance. This is their base call. If they're, first down, 55% of the time, they're going to give you this look. What do we like against that? And then it sort of spirals out from there, all the different scenarios that can play out in a football game. But it is fascinating to hear a coach when they are willing to kind of give you a little bit of insight into their mind, into their mindset in making those decisions. That may be boring to some people. It may be a little too in the weeds for other people, but I think it's a really cool glance at his thought process.
No, I love it. And he mentioned he has tape from the past. Gene Chizik has tape from the past. I think North Carolina, Wes, has the bigger challenge because I feel like they're going to have to cobble more together from the past, right? Just because we know some of the different areas South Carolina is going to draw from. Yes, you can go back and look at Logan's NFL tape, which it's the NFL. There's typically a lot more involvement with the NFL in terms of just different, number of personnel groups, multiplicity, things like that. But you're also going to see some stuff from Arkansas. You're going to see some stuff from last season at South Carolina. You're going to see some stuff from Oklahoma. I would imagine, look, this is college football. There's a lot of resources. Probably not too many personnel groupings that Dowell Loggins is going to call where North Carolina just goes, never seen this before, right? I mean, typically that's going to be on some tape that they viewed. But Loggins mentioned, hey, when you're building your openers, you mentioned game within a game, Wes. I mean, here's one. You're calling plays at the beginning of the game, number one, to get some yardage, right? And try to move the chains, try to score. But you're also building in, I want to see how they're reacting to this. If they're playing this against this, maybe we need to adjust. Maybe we need to keep calling it. Maybe we like this matchup. Ellis Johnson told me a while back, Wes, that Steve Spurrier was the best he'd ever seen at just adjusting quickly. He mentioned a lot of guys, they're going into halftime and they're saying, here's what we're seeing. Let's compare all the data. He said with Spurrier, it took maybe a couple plays and he kind of had a really good feel for it. Loggins mentioning too, halftime's too late. If you're not adjusting to what the other team's doing, you're getting to halftime, it could be too late for you. And Wes, that's going to be the case, especially in this game. If you're not having success early on offense, it might get out of hand because this North Carolina team, again, I go to this line. You can't score 14 points, 21 points, and win this game. You're going to have to find some early success on offense.
You don't want it, Chris, to get into territory. I mean, let's keep it with Arkansas since Loggins brought it up. Carolina against Arkansas last year, it felt like they were chasing that game the entire way.
They were.
It's not impossible to win. Like you've all seen your team. If you're listening, watching, you've all seen your team. For most of you, it's the Gamecocks. Have one of those games where you're chasing your tail for the entire game, and you've all seen one where you find a way to pull it out, and it's a minor miracle. It's a minor sports miracle that you made it happen. And there's some of the most exciting games in the world. But 90% of those where you feel like you're just chasing, you don't end up coming out on top. It's very hard to do. However, look no further than what South Carolina did to North Carolina in the bowl game 2 seasons ago. They were the aggressor. North Carolina was chasing that game the whole way. And even when it felt like North Carolina maybe was about to gain a little bit of momentum, they were already having to make up so much ground that South Carolina responded. And then by all intents and purposes, the game was for the most part over. And so you're to steal Chris's phrase, I don't think, Chris, you haven't used margin for error yet this football season.
Yeah, I know. It's conscious. I went to rehab in the off season on the margin for error.
Well, I'm going to use it for you, man. The margin for error, if you're chasing points.
I'm back on, what is it, on the wagon, off the wagon? It's like a Seinfeld episode, whatever it is. You're tempting me.
You're back off the wagon, I think. You fell off the wagon.
Fell off the wagon. That's right. There you go. You got it. Yeah. Okay. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know.
I'm a bad influence on you, man. But so, yeah, the fact is that I've completely lost my train of thought. But we got to move on to something else. Chris, in the meantime, why don't you tell everybody about our friends at Liberty Tax and how you have no taxiety whatsoever in your life?
I'm not falling off the taxiety wagon. I might have might be next several episodes of GC Live. I'll be overusing margin for error because of Wes tempting me with it. But I will not be tempted, Wes, by the IRS, I don't think, or any kind of tax problems, because my guy Larry over at Liberty Tax has helped me out and my family. 2 locations over in Irmo, both off St. Andrews Road, 803-462-5576. Guy Larry's awesome. Sat down, met with him. He took plenty of time to go over what we did in the past, where we're looking to go in the future. Followed up with me with emails, phone calls, text. Super available, super knowledgeable. I was absolutely blown away by his level of service. Let him do the same for you. Absolutely no taxiety. Just head it off immediately so that you're not chewing on that pencil like you see in the graphic with taxiety.
That pencil has been through a lot.
It's been through, seen some things.
Old school number 2 pencil right there. 803-462-5576. Appreciate you, Larry. Big time Gamecock fan too, and appreciate his support of the show. Everybody's got to do their taxes. At least you're supposed to. So let Larry help you out through that process if you're here in the Midlands. Let's see, Chris. Let's roll it over to defense. Clayton White. Clayton White said he's been had a couple dreams about his first defensive calls.
I feel like he talks about dreams a lot, like not being it. Like he's very sleep oriented. Like he's talking about sleep or I had a dream about this or a nightmare. He talks about that stuff a lot. Very active imagination, apparently.
I mean, it made me wonder what were the calls? Like, was he doing the old NCAA to both linebackers blitz into the A gap, just send 6?
Free fire.
Yeah. There you go. The NFL blitz, or the engage 8 from NCAA, where you send 8 poor guys, and then you have the three guys dropping into zone coverage. Hopefully that wasn't the call, but I don't know. So my maybe biggest takeaway from Clayton, just off the top of my head, was, remember how we talked about TJ Sanders kind of being, he's kind of considered a starter, even though he's on the second line on the depth chart. He said Mo Kaba, kind of the same thing. Mo Kaba considered a starter in his mind. This is a guy who the injuries have kept him from having the career he would have had. I won't even say could have had. I think he would have had to this point. But he still has been around the game. He's been around the program. He's been in this defense. He's seen a lot of ball. And so, I mean, Chris, they've got Pup Howard, a super freshman, as one backup. They got Mo Kaba as another backup. I mean, we've talked about this linebacking core and how we think they can be better, and we think that they can be, deeper. Throw in Bam Martin-Scott. I know he's questionable this week, but hopefully at some point they get him back 100%. I mean, I truly don't remember the last time they've really been able to go that far down the depth chart and feel pretty good about the athleticism you're still putting on the field.
Yeah, that to me, man, is the biggest. I'm trying to make sure I don't overstate it. Yeah, I think that's the biggest upgrade on the team, right? It has to be. When you look at what we saw last season versus this season, you started a couple guys who played a lot of ball, 2 6-year guys. Wes, you've mentioned this before, so I'll reiterate. Sherrod Green, he dealt with his fair share of tough injuries at South Carolina. Brad Johnson, when he got to South Carolina, freshman year 2017, he was a buck, right? And so he was always – it wasn't until later in his career that he picked up, Will linebacker. He was more of a buck. He was more of a Sam-type linebacker. Him playing Will was something that came on much later in his career. And so beyond that, athletically, there wasn't as much depth. You remember one year Sherrod went down, and it was, then you had Damani Staley, who kind of was your third guy. Now he was your starter, right? This season, of course, you want to stay as healthy as possible. But even not having Mo Kaba, who was, the defensive player of the spring last year, he had garnered a lot of special teams accolades. He might have been the leading tackler last year. You didn't have him, and I think that kind of showed Now you're coming in, and for a variety of reasons, Kaba isn't even technically a starter for you, right? And you still feel pretty good about that spot. So I think they're in position athletically where they've upgraded, and they've also added depth because of the types of players they have. There's a lot of different types of skill sets. There's a lot more athleticism. Is there a little bit of an experience gap? Yeah, when you're talking about a guy like Stone Blanton, who, is a true sophomore, even Debo Williams, who saw the most action of his career last year, is mainly a special teams guy as a freshman. Yeah, a little bit of an experience gap, but I think that'll be helped along by just the talent level and also the depth here. They're in a better spot.
And, two guys there, Stone Blanton, Debo Williams, they had to withstand the push from a Mokaba coming back, to an extent, the push from a guy like Pup Howard and from Bam Martin Scott too, who, by all indications before he got banged up, I think Bam Martin Scott had a really good offseason too, from what I've heard. So you've had guys pushing each other. You do have some athleticism. And Chris, as Gamecock Central subscribers learned, you have him as your bold prediction this year. How confident are you in your prediction that Stone potentially slides into the leading tackler? I was going to say conversation. I think he'll definitely be in the conversation. How confident are you that he pulls that off and is South Carolina's leading tackler?
It's pointed out to me today, Wes, that that's not that bold of a prediction, and you're probably right. If I said something like, well, South Carolina is going to beat Clemson for the second year in a row, or, something like that, it's certainly compared to some of the predictions you guys rolled out, not very much on a limb.
They said mine wasn't bold either, if that makes you feel better.
It makes me feel fine. I'm a little disappointed. I could have gone more bold, but I think I was trying to find a way to shoehorn that take in there that I do think Stone will be, how confident, reasonably. Look, the past couple seasons, USC's leading tackler was a safety. They had a run for a while where it was a linebacker. You could think back to Ernest Jones had a couple seasons. Sky Moore had a season. TJ Brunson had a season. A lot of times it is a linebacker. Now, if at the end of the year we're talking about Nick Eamon being the leading tackler, and am I going to be, gobsmacked by it? Absolutely not. But I think Blanton, Clayton White has called him a GPS linebacker. He's a guy that's around the football a lot. And I think if he is the leading tackler, to me, Wes, I think that's going to bode better, right, for this run defense. Nick Eamon plays close to the line a good bit, if last season's any indication. So he's going to make some tackles close to the line. He's also going to clean up some things that happen beyond that first line of defense. But I think last season, too often he was cleaning plays up beyond that second level. So if the Gamecocks can keep things a little bit more in the box, so to speak, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Stone this year.
Yeah, I mean, Eamon is awesome. And some of those a lot of those tackles, it wasn't just because he's cleaning things up. It's because he's cleaning things up and he's really good. Like how many times did you just say, "Oh, that run's about to go like really long," and then here comes 21 and makes a sure one-on-one tackle in the open field. I mean, this kid was a warrior last year. I mean, I saw him roll his ankle against Georgia, and I'm like, he's going to be out for a month. And then he's back in there a drive later, a few plays later. I don't remember exactly, but he's back in there going toe-to-toe with the national champs, basically. So sometimes, I think you really just hope, if you're Carolina, that most of the Eamon tackles or big plays are just because he's shooting in there to make a spectacular play. It's almost always a bad sign when your safety ends up being the leading tackler, especially a couple of years, 3 years in a row now, that would be. You don't want that, man. And you've got two linebackers in this scheme on the field most of the time. So you really are hoping that most of the running plays get funneled to those two guys, I think. And you have different style players in Stone and Debo. Debo's a headhunter, and you just kind of get the feeling, or at least I do. This is my take on Debo. If they can kind of just unlock his potential, like the actual potential there, as far as being a guy who's willing to throw his body around, knocks people backwards, gets to the football. He's kind of a high upside player. You just kind of got to, I think it's taken a little bit of time for him to get locked into how do I walk the line between being that headhunter that's sort of just like, let me attack, while also staying within the confines of what I'm supposed to do on a given play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he's grown in confidence. I think he's grown in knowledge in this defense, and physically, you certainly like, that matchup. You like Debo Williams against a quarterback running a draw play. You like Debo Williams, running the alley against a running back on a toss, right? You like him in the box against guys. He's a vicious hitter, but I think for him, it's been more about placement and coverage and run fits, right? All these different things. Again, first year, more of a special teams guy. Second year, we saw the playing time go up. He's played, Wes, in all 26 games since he's gotten to South Carolina. But we saw him last year take a more active role in the defense. Now I think you can expect another step up. Plays with a lot of confidence, plays with a chip on his shoulder. Wes, let me give you a stat, actually, too, because I don't want to gloss past this when we're talking about Nick Emmanwori and DQ Smith. What those two guys did, we just had a Nick Emmanwori love fest, rightfully so. The thing that should be exciting about Emmanwori and Smith, what they did as freshmen was tremendous, like almost unprecedented. You get two guys who are freshmen, who were not January enrollees, come in and start and play and also do so at a pretty dang high level, right? But here's a stat for you. Last season, they had Nick Emmanwori and DQ Smith were number 1 and number 2 on the team in missed tackles, actually, per PFF. Now, a lot of times when you think about missed tackles, it's normally going to be safeties and linebackers. Makes the most sense. They're going to get the most kind of open field when you're out of the box action. But you can go back and think of several plays where you can go back and look, like you said, Nick Emmanwori cleaning stuff up, Nick Emmanwori making a great play, DQ Smith making a great play. There are also some where you can go back and look at the tape and you can see freshman moments. So that should be really exciting. And I've heard a lot, Wes. I mean, DQ Smith, the defensive staff feels like he's just one of their most reliable guys, carries himself like a pro. They're expecting a leap from him. They're also expecting a leap from Nick Emmanwori. They feel like he's taken that tremendous athletic ability. Sometimes, Wes, he was getting by on that last year. Now they feel like he's putting the pieces of being a more complete player together, and that should be exciting because now if he can cut down on some of those freshman-type mistakes, that now you really, really have something, and that should be exciting to fans, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, man. The potential of those two with a year under their belt, a year together, a year kind of even knowing exactly where the other is going to be, got to be exciting for the fans and, of course, for Clayton White and for Torian Gray and all those guys. We kind of just went all off the course there. Did you have any specific takeaways from Clayton White? I didn't feel like I feel like we've learned all we're going to learn about the defense until we actually see them play. Like there wasn't a whole lot new for him to tell us, but is there anything that caught your eye?
Yeah, no, I mean, not specifically. And not to sound like I'm tired of hearing from Clayton White or anybody else. That's not the case, but I'm in that preseason camp phase where now I'm ready to see them. Like the players are ready to hit somebody else. The coaches are ready to see them hit somebody else. I'm there too. Like we are at the point where we've advanced. The hay's kind of in the barn. Like we know we kind of have a feel of what to expect. We have a feel for what the questions are. Let's line it up. Let's go play. So nothing super new for me today.
Yeah, agree. So we'll talk Pete Limbo. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's talk about Pete Limbo. And so you're always going to get something from a Limbo press conference, I feel like. Now, most of the time it's about football. Sometimes you might just learn about life or World War II or minivans, the S&P 500. You never know what's going to pop up. However, with Limbo, maybe I shouldn't be shocked. I shouldn't be surprised by this at all. But my man was he was like just popping off every single North Carolina special teams performer and giving a bio on them like a professor teaching a class he's taught 15 times. Very impressive.
Yeah, not surprised. We know that Pete Limbo goes deep into the research, and he goes deep into, the motivational tactics, and he uses every little thing as a potential advantage. That's why he's so good. That's why Shane Beamer hired him. It's always interesting to think back, Wes, at maybe how different things would be if Pete Limbo had said, "No, I'm good, Shane. I'm staying where I'm at." Shane Beamer would probably be coaching the special teams, and they may be pretty dang good, but I don't know if they'd be this good because you basically have Beamer and Limbo both kind of working on them. Pete Limbo's in his office all the time, and he's working just on special teams. He's not working on special teams and linebackers, special teams and tight ends. He's working on special teams. That's all he does, and it really shows through. And I mean, Wes, every anecdote, every story we hear about this guy is normally related to his attention to detail. And so that was not a surprising thing to hear today.
So he gave us the public facing bios on these guys. It had my brain, had my wheels turning. We'll never know, but it did make me wonder. I wonder what the in-house little scribbles in the margin. Oh, this guy doesn't protect the football well. This guy, he does the rugby kick 63% of the time. And this kid, a regular punt, 27%, and then he does coughing, like all the little details of what he's picked up on, especially with some extra time to prepare. Like that might be, I've never, dude, we've covered Carolina football for a long time. We've never been excited about special teams and wondering what was going to happen like you are with this crew. Like they affect every game. And every time we say, I wonder if this is the point where they don't find a way to affect a game. And then they even the Florida game, which nothing else went right for Carolina at all. They hit a fake for a touchdown.
Yeah, it is the most complete experience in terms of special teams we've ever had. I may be forgetting something, and certainly some people may point out some past more individualized instances to us. I mean, Wes, every time a team kicked to Ace Sanders as a punt returner, you're going,
good point.
There's a possibility here. But in that same environment, we weren't typically sitting there going, all right, let's see what kind of fake punt they unleash, or let's see about blocking a punt. Like we didn't see that. And Carolina had some guys with really good special teams backgrounds, and we never saw that. I mean, Shane Beamer helped out with it at South Carolina, Joe Robinson at South Carolina, Ray Luedecke. There have been some good special teams coaches that have come through here. We've never had this complete an experience where literally every single special teams play could be a highlight just because it's so well executed and really nothing happens, which is a good thing. Sometimes nothing happens, and that's a great play. It's hidden yardage. It's the way that the gunners cover a punt, and then it's the fake. So you just get all of it in one, and it's obviously been, I mean, Shane Beamer and Limbo talk all the time about how it's kind of part of the program's identity, and there's no doubt about that.
For sure. I want to talk a little bit more about Limbo and what he had to say. You always get quite a bit from him. But first, going to tell everybody about our friends at My Perfect franchise and Andy Luedecke. Give Andy a call, 404-973-9901, or shoot him an email, andy@myperfectfranchise.net. As we have told you before, if you're ready to leave the corporate rat race, you want to try to live out the American dream, maybe you're just looking for a side hustle while you still keep your current job, or if you're just wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, our friend Andy can help. He is a franchise consultant, which means he helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. The best thing about it is that his services are 100% free. He is here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership. So essentially, you talk to Andy, you tell him what your goals are, what your financial picture is, and then he says, I think this franchise A, B, and C, and D would work perfectly for you. Then he puts the two of you together. So again, give Andy a shout, 404-973-9901. Back to Pete Lembo, Chris. I thought it was interesting just hearing him talk about a game one and the number, what did he say? There were 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns in week 0. You don't really have that many games in week 0, but watch college football. If you're not going to the game Saturday and you're watching games on TV all day, or if you're watching the games on Thursday, we got some Sunday games, a Monday game. Watch how many games last week and this week are plagued by special teams, not great impact plays, but are also plagued by special teams miscues. And Pete Lembo, by pretty much every indication at this point, is a top 5, if not the top special teams coordinator in the country. I heard a guy speaking today, Chris, who refuses to rest on his laurels because he knows how quickly it can go bad on special teams.
No, and you can tell even in games, Wes, Pete Lembo very rarely allows himself, a smile, which he's talked about. Hey, I'm going to try to do that more. The Clemson game, you can think about a fist pump when Kai Kroger nailed a punt, but you also think about the biggest play of that game when they forced the fumble and he's pulling Kawan Banks aside, talking to him about something that happened during the play, right? Like in the midst of the celebration. So we know that Pete is going to build, we talk about his library of fakes. He has a library of here's what happened in the NFL. Here's what happened in college games, the good, the bad, the ugly. And he's going to show those things to his players to drive home the impact. Wes, I was thinking, last year, think about the Georgia State game, right? South Carolina, again, they won by 21. It didn't really look like it. They weren't dominant offensively. They weren't dominant defensively, but they were dominant on special teams. That was a huge mismatch, just schematically and from a player standpoint. And so that's an area where they're able to create a lot of mismatches, and it makes it a lot tougher on their teams. And his preparation and that not resting on laurels is a big reason for that.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier today, man, but the amount of time other teams have to prepare for your special teams now that the word is out on South Carolina special teams, it kind of goes both ways. Just running a super simple surprise fake or a surprise 2-point conversion that's just basic probably doesn't fly anymore if you're South Carolina, because they're on alert for that at all times. But how many times do you maybe spring a punt return because they have to be in punt safe against you? How much extra practice time that they could be working on offense or defense is put in to prepare for what you might do on special teams? Now, if you're Pete Lembo, you just got to go deeper. You got to go deeper into the special teams encyclopedia. You got to maybe have some fakes that we've already seen this, fakes that almost build off of some of their other fakes. They're not just, your typical, to go back to NCAA and Madden, your typical just basic, the holder pulls the ball up and runs a bootleg after faking a field goal. You got to get a little more and more creative with it. But their guys have been so good. Tonka Hemingway, so good at mixing other guys in and finding roles for them on special teams. You go into every game saying, all right, what's next? What do they have in store for us? But I think that also serves to sort of keep an opponent on their heels, which is what you always want. A guy he mentioned, so we were talking earlier this week about Beamer saying, there's guys not on this depth chart that are going to play on Saturday night. And some of that will be on special teams, obviously. How about our guy, Zabari Sandy, getting a shout out from Limbo today, getting a little bit of love. And, he maybe is a guy, I don't think we've talked about him really at all on the show yet, Chris. So let's give Zabari a little bit of love. He's playing some corner. Mm-hmm. He was out there with maybe that third group on one of the practice windows, I think. So working his way into the mix as a true freshman, rightfully so, but maybe a bit of a opportunity for him to help as a freshman on special teams.
Yeah, and we know Limbo's been auditioning some guys, man, for some different things. They return their kicking, punting, battery, which is great, but some other guys are not back. There's some key coverage guys and some key, shield guys that you got to take a look at. So we know he'll play guys if they're the best fit. He's looking for specific skill sets and specific, willingness to do things. So yeah, we have not focused much at all on Zabari, and I have a feeling Wes is probably going to be a guy or two during the season that pops up and you see, that guy, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a freshman, hey, that guy's getting some run on special teams. And I'm very interested, Wes, when we get through with the North Carolina game, to go back and say who was out there on special teams. That'll be something that I think we'll spend a good bit of time on.
Yeah, for sure, man. So you learn so much about a team. Game 1, game 2, new details, new data. I actually like to sort of, if you can see it on the TV copy, go back and just see, all right, who's on the kickoff team? Who's on the kickoff return team? Are there which guys on this team that aren't playing on offense and defense? Because usually that can be a sign for the future. That can be a sign of, okay, these guys are building trust within the staff. These guys are showing they want to have a role and they're going to work hard to get a role. So I think that if you kind of want to get deeper past the surface level stuff, that can be pretty beneficial. All right. You got anything else on Limbo press conference, Chris?
No, I think that's all I got, man.
Yeah, he said North Carolina's special teams have steadily improved since Mac Brown has been there. You could tell there's a good bit of respect for what they're doing and a good bit of respect for their specialist on their roster. Let's hit maybe a couple of these questions, Chris. Craig says 15 or more carries. Let me just start over. DK, more than 15 carries. I was trying to rephrase what Craig said, and
didn't work out.
My brain did a sentence that wasn't even a sentence. DK, more than 15 carries.
Whew. Yes. Yes, I'll go there.
How strong you feel about it?
Nope. not strong. That's a low confidence pick. But we got to give Craig a pick. I can't say I don't know. I'm not guessing. I'm low confidence. I could easily be swayed the other way, I think.
Yeah. How much do you think these new clock rules are going to play into the stats of like?
Well, Limbo talked about that today. Maybe that should have been another one of my takeaways. Was it Limbo or was it Loggins? I think it was Limbo.
I think it was Limbo. Everybody was asked about it, but
yeah, they seem to see a decrease, right, in the overall amount of plays. But do we have a big enough sample size to say like this is the effect? No, probably not. Net overall, probably less plays.
Yeah,
but we don't know is it on average? Let's say we finish the 2023 season. Is it 5 less? Is it 10 less? Like what does that look like? We don't really know. But yeah, certainly. I think look, and this is a team also. Maybe this is the point you were going to make. I have a feeling you're leaning the other way. This is a team that might throw the football a good bit. So you got to bake that in as well.
Yeah, questions like that are so hard to answer because they're dependent on so many other variables. So if you get that other variable wrong in your head, then it's one of those things. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if he got 15 or more. Would it surprise me if he got 13 carries and Juju got 10 and somebody else got 5? No, because I could see a scenario where Rattler throws the ball 40 times in this game. He said more than 15. That's actually a lot of carries in a college football game. If you think about the times Marshawn got up into like near the 20s, those were games where it felt like they were force feeding him the ball.
Yep.
So
on the other hand, just to play devil's advocate, there are some games where South Carolina wasn't good enough offensively to, sustain drives and to get enough plays where maybe that number could have crept up in theory. Mm-hmm. And then we saw some other games where the carries were not as extensive because they were thrown it more around the yard. So, yeah, that is a good question. That's kind of a stumper there by Craig.
Yeah. Happy. Great screen name, man. He said perhaps the clock rule change is the reason we see more hurry up on tape out of camp. Maybe. I mean, I think some of that is Spencer wanting to play with a little bit faster tempo. And frankly, I think, I saw there was like one clip on Twitter of the team running hurry up. And I think people took it and ran with it. And it's like, well, they do tempo work 11 on 11 early in practice, like quite a bit. Like that's a way to get the tempo of the practice going. Like that's not necessarily a sign that they're going to be some hurry up, fast tempo team. It's a little bit more of a practice thing than anything, I think. Now, could we possibly see them use a little more tempo, especially if they're having success offensively? I think so, but I think that's more just game to game, situation to situation. And if Spencer is in a rhythm and they feel like that's helping him, then yeah, I think you could see that. We had two people ask the same questions at the same exact time. Pretty funny. Gamecock retweeter, great Twitter account. Give him a follow. And Preston Jones, who scores the first touchdown of the season for the Gamecocks? Chris is, I guess Chris didn't like that question. He decided to dip out on us. I was just going to give you an answer, but since I got to stall until Chris gets back. There he is. He's back.
I think the storm got me, Wes, so we're on precarious ground here.
Well, we're almost done anyway, but if we just drop off, then y'all know why.
Yep.
Maybe it's because of the spring game. I'm going to say Trey Knox.
Dang it. I was going to go with the tight end as well.
You were going to go Josh Simon, probably.
Well, maybe. Let me reconfigure though. Let me see. You know what? I'm going DK Joyner. Rushing touchdown.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's go there. I like my pick.
What if I said Lenore Sellers in a short yardage package?
I'm in love with it.
You can do here. That's another question. You can dream up every possible scenario for the first touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Who was it last year? Marshawn?
First touchdown. Yeah, I think so.
I think it was, but I don't remember either. So it is funny. It's hard to predict, but who knows? We'll see. Travis saying there's no reason why DK shouldn't have 5 to 7 attempts in the first 2 drives. I think that depends on how well they're running it. Erlin says if Spalding doesn't play, who's the next nickel up besides Keenan Nelson? Yeah, it's a good question, Erlin. I think you got several guys who could play there. Kawan Banks is a guy who can play anywhere. D'Angelo Gibbs, kind of the forgotten guy at this point. He was in that mix behind those guys in camp. There's always the possibility, if they want to, that they just slide DQ down to nickel in that scenario. Jalen Kilgore has, I think, really had a great camp at safety, so you would maybe slide DQ down, play Kilgore at safety. So I don't have an exact answer for you, Erlen, but I think all those guys are possibilities depending on exactly what they've done in practice leading up to this week. Agree, Chris?
Yeah, I agree.
There's a couple other questions. Michael says, what advantage do we have that UNC is moving a right guard to left tackle? I mean, it's never a positive if you're a team having to do that. But Carolina has their questions too, I think.
That they do. And so it's an advantage potentially for South Carolina defensively, but you have the same issue on the other side that could, in theory, cause you some problems. I mean, we know that North Carolina has felt better about their interior of their offensive line and not as good about the tackles, and that's very similar to South Carolina, of course, as well. So it could be something they take advantage of, but you look at it, South Carolina's edge position is a question. So does it end up being weakness on weakness, or can South Carolina exploit that? That remains to be seen. If you're South Carolina, you hope that you can. You hope that you can use that. Obviously, North Carolina struggled even last year in the midst of the season that Drake May had. They gave up a ton of sacks, and you got to hope that continues as well.
How much do you think the fact – I mean, it's kind of no coincidence that both these teams have struggled to find solidified tackles. Like, I think some of that is just, hey, these guys are hard to find in recruiting. You know, I think we talked about that with South Carolina's recruiting class, how key it is to get guys like Josiah Thompson and Cam Pringle in this class that will be coming in next year. You got a guy like Tree Babalade in this class that's the true freshman right now. But these guys just are not easy to find. And then if you do find them, they're not easy to land.
They're not. It's a premium position. It's kind of like, the NFL. I mean, offensive tackles are going to be paid very highly. Edge rushers are going to be paid highly. Quarterbacks. And you kind of look, those are the positions that are really hard to find at the college level too. You talk about this a lot in the portal, West. It's kind of, hey, if you need tackle, well, man, just go get one in the portal. Well, that's hard because they're either going pro or they're sticking it out at their school because they're not looking around going, well, I'm not getting the ball. No, you're not getting the ball. Nobody wants to tackle to have the football. So they're much, much harder to find in the portal. And so, yeah, that's why this does set up really well for South Carolina when you look at how they're recruiting on the offensive line. But very interesting storyline, Wes, that both these teams have some pretty significant questions here. And, whatever team solves those in a bigger and better way, that will give them an advantage. It will not be the only storyline in this game or the only thing that has an effect, but it will have an effect. And maybe, Wes, it's one of these tackles on either team, they allow a free rusher, and now the quarterback fumbles or he throws a pick because he's pressured. that's the type of thing that I think is going to end up mattering in this game. So definitely storyline to.
I think going to be key for both these quarterbacks too, to be able to do some things while under duress. That was one thing Drake May actually, as much pressure as teams got on him last year, did a really good job of operating under duress. Rattler has done a good job by all indications of getting the ball out quick in practice, quick release, decisive decisions. Well, he's going to have to continue to do that against North Carolina as well when you have an offensive line that still has questions at offensive tackle. All right, we're out of time for today. That should be a good preview for what we will talk about on Friday. We'll have our Friday final preview of South Carolina versus North Carolina. In the meantime, Mike Yuva will have a Thursday afternoon show talking about whatever he wants to talk about. And then on Friday, I believe he's going to have J.D. Piquel, national guy for On 3, who actually just picked South Carolina to beat North Carolina. So we will hear from JD, Mike will on Thursday. And then on Friday, we'll have final preview, thoughts on this North Carolina team. We'll take everything we've learned the last, 8 months and try to dial it into one final preview show of South Carolina versus North Carolina. Appreciate everybody for joining. Appreciate everybody in the chat, your questions, your comments, all that stuff. Awesome as always. We're going to get out of here, but we'll see you all on Friday.